Hello, Erica, and thank you so much for being here to share your story today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You are in Los Angeles yourself, and you have a 10 and a half week old. So this is kind of
Yeah.
a feat for showing up here. You're still in your fourth trimester.
Yes, yes. And I can hear him. He doesn't sound super happy, but luckily he's with his grandparents right now. So,
Amazing. Okay. Well, if you need to go or feed, we've had plenty of people needing to feed babies here. Whatever you need to do, you do. We've seen it all, and it needs to happen,
yes.
right? Babies need to get fed. Um, so, so just for anyone sort of just tuning in, we are going to cover some topics around pregnancy loss today, and you've generously offered to share your story of postpartum anxiety and having been part of an outpatient care, sort of I think you used the word intensive outpatient
Yes.
treatment. Okay. So I am going to follow your lead wherever you're comfortable starting. Let's go there.
Sure. I mean, my birth story is sort of exciting because I was in the care of an OB the whole time, and decided to switch to having a home birth with a midwife the day before my due date. So that in and of itself is very exciting. But I think a lot of that comes from the pregnancy losses. My husband and I, we experienced two pregnancy losses before giving birth to Amato, which is my son. And I think the two pregnancy losses really made me feel that I was a high risk pregnancy, like a high risk mom.
Mhm.
Um, I'm I'm just on the cusp of being a geriatric mom, and uh, and I think having that experience of the losses going into our pregnancy with a motto, I knew that the statistics say like having one pregnancy loss doesn't change your chances of having more, but having two, it really jumps up. So we had two, and so trying to get pregnant with Amato, we did everything. We did every test. We did
Mhm.
a fertility diet. You know, we were just and we went to a reproductive endocrinologist. So once I got pregnant, I was able to do an ultrasound weekly. You know, so I kind of thought of myself as high risk,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and it wasn't until the very end when I was starting to see the other OBs in my OB's practice just to get ready for birth and meet who might be with me. Um, that a new OB came in our room and goes, "Wow, you've just had a perfect pregnancy." And I was like, "Oh, right. I've been healthy. I've felt great this whole time." And that started this train of like, wait, why aren't we trying the home birth, which is something I've always wanted to
Mhm.
do?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think I kind of felt I got empowered in my pregnancy in that moment and was like, oh, I'm not high risk. Actually, we're doing great.
Mhm.
Let's try this. And so we did.
The day before your due date. I mean, that's amazing. You're like last minute. And did you get pushback from anybody?
So actually, we were fully transparent with our OB as well, and I spoke to her fully transparently and said, you know, I have a history of anxiety, and she knows that. She has treated me, and I said the thing that's the sticky point for me about birth, like I was excited for labor, but the sticky point for me is when I finally get to the hospital. That's the part I don't want to do. Like I'm excited to labor at home, but that like and my plan was to stay at home for as long as possible, of course, and uh, as many folks want to do when they're trying to do unmedicated. I wanted to stay home as long as possible. And I was looking forward to everything except getting to the hospital. And I was like, you know, and I told my OB, I was like, I'm considering a home birth. And she was actually so supportive.
Amazing.
Um, she was like, the reality is you will have to transfer out of care, but you know, and she also gave me my options too. She was like, there are things that we can do to help ease your anxiety during that time. So it was like,
Mm.
I felt very supported in that. And then I had a doula, and my doula is how I found my midwife. She was like, I have a midwife that will still take you. She's taken people, at 40 weeks, 41 weeks, at the last minute. So that through my doula, I found my midwife, and my midwife team, and then Amado was born here in this room at 41 weeks, 1 day.
Wow. Oh my goodness. It's interesting. I just love hearing this because a lot of people would assume that if you had anxiety, you would potentially feel safer in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital where you're like, oh, well, if
Mm-hmm.
anything goes wrong, everyone can be there, blah, 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 right? That's sort of the
Yep,
story we hear. And in your case, you're sort of like, no, going to the hospital is what was giving me anxiety. So I think
definitely.
it just sort of drives home the point that it's really about ideally giving birth in the place where you feel safest,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I don't, after now giving birth at home, I feel like I'm also curious about trying it at the hospital too. Like
Mm.
I'd like to just have all the different options. We'll see how many babies I can give birth to. But let me try one in the ocean and one.
Well, you are in
But
California, so.
yeah, I could. Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm just an advocate for like
Mhm.
everyone doing what feels best to them. Not it doesn't have to look a certain way. Um, just what feels best to them. And for me, I knew that, even though we live in a small 2-bedroom apartment, I'm so comfortable here with our 4 cats. I've lived here for over a decade. And I had this vision of taking a walk in labor. And um, so I started labor at 10 p.m. the night before, and my doula, my early labor was not typical. It was immediately like
Mhm.
huge contractions very fast. I don't even know. I was not in charge of the contraction timer, but my doula came around 6 a.m. I think, and then the midwife team came around 8 or 9 a.m. I think,
Mhm.
and I think they checked me around that time, and I guess I was already 8 or 9 centimeters. uh, my doula was like, I had no idea that you were already there. You didn't act like it at all. And so I labored for a little longer, and I took a walk in my neighborhood at 9 centimeters
What?
and had
Oh my
and
gosh.
I had contractions on trees. I just
Oh,
like leaned over trees. My husband's a filmmaker, and he took out a Super 8 camera and was shooting Super 8 of me having contractions on trees in the neighborhood.
I mean, I can just imagine if neighbors were like, what? I think she's in labor. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
someone call a
We
doctor.
Yes, we even saw our evil landlord at one point as we were coming back to the apartment, and I was clearly in labor. Oh
Oh my
no.
God.
But but yeah, so I was already 9 centimeters, but my water hadn't broke. So
Mhm.
my midwife, it was right there. She used just her finger, broke my water, and things went
Yeah.
0 to 60 there. And so I got in the tub not long after that. They not a tub, a pool. They set up a pool here in this room, and that did ease some pain, but
Hmm.
getting him down and out was a whole, like, I had been really laboring amazingly up until that point, and then I was like, oh, this is a whole new level of contraction. um, and then so we had sort of an emergent situation that um, I think kind of led into I know what we want to talk about after this, sort of my postpartum anxiety and a little bit of PTSD. very common. The baby was having D cells, and they were checking me in the pool, and the D cells were still coming. So they got me out of the pool, got me on hands and knees, trying to see if it's position, and then it was still happening, and it was going on for a little too long. And my midwife was like, my midwife looked me in the eyes, and she said, "This is not going to be your like candles, Enya playing in the background
Mm.
birth. Like, we have to get him out." Well, actually, we didn't know he was a he. We have to get the baby out. Um, and so she got me on the stool, and everyone got around me, and I had to, as a first time mom, learn to push him out. And at one point, um, I was pushing hard and fast, and they were worried. They knew everything was going to be okay, or they hoped everything was going to be okay, but they just wanted to have backup. So they called 911, which I think really scared me, because at that
Yeah.
moment I couldn't ask, like, why are we calling 911?
Yeah.
And so, as a first time mom, I pushed him out in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Um, I started pushing, and he was out in 10 minutes. And my doula was on the phone with 911. And apparently, the paramedics were walking up to our apartment right as I pushed him out. So they didn't have
Mm.
to come in. Thank God she was able to turn them away. But I have a video of him being born, and I'm just in utter shock at what happened. Like, so it was really interesting. I had this beautiful labor with my husband, taking walks, all this. And then the final moment was really emergent and kind of traumatic to me. And I'm really grateful in the end that I was at home, because of those D cells, I don't know what they would have
Mm.
wanted to do at the hospital. But his APGAR score was 5 at 1 minute and 10 at 5 minutes. So he was beautiful, wonderful. And he's here.
No, that is huge. I'm very happy to hear that it all was okay and you didn't have the paramedics coming in. That would have changed the vibe, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So, do you think, how much, I guess I should phrase it this way, how much do you think you mentioned two things, a prior history of anxiety,
Mm-hmm,
and you
mm-hmm,
also mentioned two pregnancy losses.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the perfect storm, unfortunately, for
Yeah.
having more anxiety in this pregnancy and in your postpartum experience. So are you able to share a little bit, perhaps two-part question, what was something or what were some of the things that your doctor and you were able to do to manage anxiety in pregnancy? And then how much do you think the pregnancy losses exacerbated it?
I think the pregnancy losses informed the anxiety I felt in the first trimester, because I had been through, this was my third first trimester, and my losses were a little later than typical. I lost both babies around 11 to 12 weeks. So I pretty much had almost gotten through the first trimester with both babies, when we lost them. And the first baby, I had the DNC.
Mhm.
The second baby, we miscarried at home. And so that was a very interesting experience. I felt a lot of gratitude for that experience, because I did have to do a form of labor,
Mhm.
miscarrying at home. And at one point, I had basically like a 45-minute long contraction, to just basically dilate. And so I felt a lot of gratitude for that experience, that my body had sort of prepared me for then laboring with my son. I think that the pregnancy losses, once I got past that milestone, where I had lost the other babies, I think my anxiety lessened week and week. And by the end, I feel like by the third trimester, especially in that moment I was talking about towards the end, where I had the realization that I was having a super healthy pregnancy, I think I was sort of on top of the world. I felt like I felt really strong in my pregnancy. I have pictures of myself on top of there's a mountain near me that you can hike up the stairs, and I on my due date I hiked all the way up. They're like infamously hard, and I just felt very strong. Very everyone thought I thought I had a girl because I felt so good. Everyone thought I had extra estrogen. In the end, I had a boy. But so in terms of management of my anxiety, I wasn't choosing medication at the time during my pregnancy. It's actually something that I chose to stop taking after my first pregnancy loss because I wasn't sure if that had something to do with it. And so I was just managing with weekly therapy, personal therapy. And then during my pregnancy with Amato, I was also part of a weekly art therapy group, which was amazing. And so, yeah, by the end, I was feeling just really, really regulated with my anxiety, but was very honest with everyone that was part of my team that like I have this past of panic attacks and agoraphobia, and I know that this could be something that rears its ugly head postpartum. And I know we're going to talk about it, but it did.
Can you mind explain what's agoraphobia?
Agoraphobia.
Oh, is it leaving the house?
It's similar.
Okay.
So agoraphobia, that's what we see in the media, a sort of agoraphobia, like the shut-in. But what it really is just situations that I feel trapped in. I don't want to be a part of. So I feel great leaving the house, actually. But that that is another reason why I didn't want to be in the hospital. I don't like situations where people say you can't leave.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
So.
Okay. No, thank you for explaining that. I was like, I think we need clarification because
Yes.
just people listening know a little bit more detail. So
Mm-hmm.
what happened if you're comfortable sharing postpartum? So how did this all, I mean, we know that like the hormonal cascade is greater than any other mammal in the entire human like lifespan. Like what you
Mm.
go through is like puberty times 100 all compressed in a short period of time, and that can obviously have a huge impact on your mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have reflected and it's a joke most likely, but I've said I would prefer to push a motto out every day for the rest of my life than go through this first 72 hours postpartum. Like uh, pushing him, I even had an emergency episiotomy because it was such an emergent situation. I was like, I would get that episiotomy every day if I didn't have to go through the first 72 hours postpartum. But that cascade of hormones mixed with the lack of sleep and being exhausted, your body being so exhausted from labor, my predisposition already to anxiety, and then the fact that we did have an emergent situation, and um, it was hard for me to like. I think I was mostly in shock. I didn't. I felt like I didn't get to experience the oxytocin because it became this emergent situation. I didn't know if I was going to die, if he was going to die. Um, there were paramedics coming to my door. Like it was so much to process. I think that led to some, I might be throwing this term around too lightly, but it felt like it led to PTSD. I felt like those first 72 hours, we left the twinkle lights on in this room where he was born, and I didn't even want to walk past this room. I didn't even want to come in to turn the twinkle lights off. We put art up all over during labor that my husband and I had made. And like at one point I asked my husband, like, can you just take the art down? Like, I didn't want to be reminded of labor anymore. And I think I really struggled to connect with Amato in the beginning. And his second night of life, and this leads into the anxiety as well. We struggled with latching, and we struggled actually for 2 months with latching. He only started latching. Well, gosh, I could go in. He also ended up having a hospital stay. He had to have surgery for pyloric stenosis. So
Oh my
he's had a
God.
lot. Yes,
What
he's had a lot.
what is pyloric stenosis?
So, luckily, it is something very treatable and with no lasting effects, basically. But it has to do with a muscle in his stomach being too tight. And my husband explains it better. I don't exactly understand, but essentially, it presents itself around 2 weeks of age. It's most common with firstborn males. And essentially they just become like the exorcist, like they're
Oh,
just become they start projectile vomiting, they can't keep anything down, and the only treatment is surgery.
oh my
So at 2.5 weeks, on top of my anxiety, we were in the hospital, which we had avoided. We went to the hospital I would have given birth at.
yeah.
um, so there was a lot going on. He also didn't have latch. He was
Yeah.
not latching. So the second night of his life, we actually used donor colostrum, and I I just was so wrecked to the point that I felt like I was bordering on psychosis. Like my thoughts, my brain was, I was so tired, and I just said, we were like heading to bed, and I turned to my husband and I was like, actually, can you guys just go out to the living room? Like, could you wheel his crib out there? I have to sleep. And so my husband gave him donor colostrum through a syringe, for 5 hours, and I was able to sleep. And thank God for that. I think things would have gotten even worse without that. But yeah, those first few weeks postpartum and those first 72 hours were so, my anxiety was so high. I was really struggling to connect with Amato. I was anxious about myself. I kept feeling like, you know, am I dying? Am I going crazy? Like, will I have to go to the ER because I feel so horrible? Will I have to go to like a psych ward because my brain feels so um, nuts? And uh, luckily, around 2 weeks postpartum, two things happened. I realized this is uh, way too much, and I called my mom. And uh, my mom lives. We're in the States. Yeah, you knew that. So she lives in Nebraska. It's far away from California. Um, or actually, she lives in Iowa. Let me be factually correct. She lives in Iowa. And I just was like, because my plan for postpartum had been, let me wait and see how I feel. I wasn't sure if I'm going to be like moody and I don't want anyone around. So the plan with grandparents was wait for a call.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Around 2 weeks, I just had to call my mom and cry and say, I need you. And I realized, yeah, of course, my entry into motherhood, the thing that I needed most was to also be taken care of, and to be taken care of by the person who took care of me originally. I really needed my mother, and she flew in the next day, the next morning. And um, and the second thing that happened was I was able to talk to my OB, who I ended up not birthing with, but she welcomed me back into her care because I knew I needed to get on some medicine. And so I was able to be prescribed some anxiety medicine. And and then like 3 days later is when we went into the hospital. So
For the
thank
surgery.
yes, for the surgery. So thank God my mom, who's a pediatric nurse, was already here
Oh,
for us going to the ER. And so slowly but surely I have been improving. You mentioned in the beginning, I also then joined an intensive outpatient program with other mothers going through postpartum depression and anxiety. It's all on Zoom. We bring our babies, we meditate, we do yoga, we talk and process. And I've now been in that for over a month, and that has been immensely helpful too. And then my mom stayed here for a really intense 2 weeks. She had to fly back, but then her and my dad drove back out here, and they've been here for over a month just to
amazing.
help us out. And I was sort of joking this morning because I I keep getting a lot of naps because I have my parents here to help, and I was like, am I getting more naps than like the baby? But I was remembering in our outpatient program yesterday, we were talking about like getting to shower or getting to take a nap,
Yeah.
is not self-care. It's just a basic need. And so, I could feel guilty or like I'm a bad mom, but I have help. I needed help.
Mhm.
I, and I want to feel no mom guilt, just feel fully comfortable in the fact that, prioritizing sleep
Yeah.
helps my anxiety. Prioritizing, you know, always taking my medicine helps my anxiety. Because of my anxiety, I was having, and the hormones, I was having such a hard time eating postpartum. Um, I I was nauseated and headachy, and the night sweats were
Oh
horrible.
God, yeah.
Prioritizing just trying to get a meal,
Mhm.
so helpful. So yeah, I think prioritizing my basic needs in the first 2 weeks especially was utmost. And then because of that, I think I struggled to bond with my son at first, but it's been a slow
Mhm.
transition to the point where now he latches. And now I feel like, I do feel like in the last few weeks, it, and I think it fits where he is developmentally as well. I do feel like he knows that I'm mom, and finding comfort in me
Mhm.
in a different way than grandma and grandpa or dad. So I do feel like we're our connection is getting strengthening every day.
That's amazing. What would you say to anyone who is watching or listening to this who, either is experiencing PPD or PPA or has concerns given their health history that they may experience it? What would you
Yeah.
say to them?
I So I thought we were prepared postpartum. We were prepared for the fourth trimester. I read the fourth trimester. The book. We had a deep freezer. I made lactation, banana bread and lactation balls. We had so much soup the night of labor. We did 6 loads of laundry and made 2 soups during labor.
Amazing.
um, so I felt like we're ready, and I really didn't account for how my brain and my heart was going to feel. Um, so, I think you can't predict just what those hormones are going to do,
Mhm.
and what your recovery will be like, just like you can't predict what your birth will be like.
Yeah.
Um, Luckily, physically, I healed quickly and well. I didn't physically feel pain. It was all mental anguish. And my suggestion would be, um, know your options and be loose and ready for what you might need. And I mean to say, you do have options like mental health um, therapy programs, mental health medicine, and uh, and if you're already working with a talk therapist, I would be ready to schedule your next appointment, and then thinking about who you want around you. You know, I wasn't sure who I would want around me. I didn't want, you know, I didn't want old habits to come back up. I was like, I'm not sure if I want my mom and dad around because I don't want to like get moody postpartum and act like a teenager like the way I used to. I don't want to be, catty with them postpartum. And then I could have never predicted that like my mom was the number one person I needed. Like
Mhm.
even over my husband, and I just absolutely adore my husband, but I needed my mom. So you just can't predict it, but maybe having everyone on standby.
Yeah.
um and yeah, and then yeah, just I mean being honest. It for me, the when I can't talk about it is when I'm doing the worst. And it's so hard for me to even just say it out loud to my husband. Like, I am so scared. I'm having such a hard time. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It's so hard for
Mhm.
me to say those things. But once I can say them, it everyone knows then that I'm struggling, they can help me, and it is a form of release. And then my final tip, I think, would be when in doubt, cry. The release of tears helped me so much. I think the fear that built up during the emergent situation at the end of my labor. I think I didn't experience the like once I pushed him out, I didn't get to experience the oxytocin crying. He's amazing. It
Mhm.
was all I was still in shock. And so I didn't cry for the first like 36 hours, I think. I never shed a tear, never shed a tear in labor either. And it to the point where my husband then put on this Dolly Parton song that always makes me cry
Oh,
because it was like, you need to cry, you need to release,
yeah.
like huge thing just happened. And so he put it on and I held my son and I was oh and it helped. It really helped. So when in doubt, let those tears out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I mean, you've touched on so many really hard topics and you've done it with such honesty. And I do know, like, there's so many women who have shared, at least with me, that they have felt shame for not bonding
Mm,
immediately with their child. And it can happen and it's not your fault. And there should be no shame about it. So by talking about it, we can take that away and we can, encourage others to get the help that they need.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Erica. I'm
Absolutely.
very grateful to you and I'm confident that it's going to help a lot of other people.
Absolutely. Thank you.